What is up, everybody? I'm No Lux Given here with your afternoon snap, and today I've got a super exciting video because I just got infinite rank in Marvel Snap with Kang Galactus. So we're gonna look at the last 15 games on my climb from rank 97.8, that's where I'm at the start of this one, all the way up to rank 100. This game starts off with me playing armor to steal my opponent's Titania. Just got lucky there that they played Titania in the same location. Well, it makes sense to play it into Asgard, I think. And then we play Wave into Asgard on turn 3, and my opponent plays Polaris to move over my armor into Nidavellir. So this isn't great for me because now we are losing in both locations, so we don't have priority, but I'm still gonna go for this turn 4 Galactus. We've waved it out. We now draw Spider-Man off the top, which is a pretty nice draw because then we'll be able to lock my opponent out of the location on turn 6. However, get something different, and despite how much I've been playing Galactus, this has never happened to me before. The location that I Galactus to is actually the location that my opponent winds up playing Storm to. So now we are Galactus in the flooded location, which is going to be totally locked out for both of us on that final turn. So we both only have one final turn to play a card here, and we just have to try to play our biggest one. So I'm going to just wind up playing Hobgoblin, as that is 8 more power to the location, and we'll see what my opponent comes up with, and what they are eventually going to come up with is just retreating. And you can see here now that brings me up to rank 97.9. This game looks like it's going to be pretty straightforward with a turn 3 wave into Galactus Spider-Man. But this game is anything but. My opponent plays Debris, and I wave into Vormir specifically to play around Magneto. That way my opponent can't move my wave with Magneto, it's just off the board. However, that's not what my opponent has. Can you guess the tech card? Leave it down in the comments below if you know how my opponent is planning on stopping Galactus this turn. Oh wait, seriously, I was totally thrown off by this. This one has never come up in all of my games. Galactus getting beaten here by, here it is, Absorbing Man, copying Debris to give me yet another rock. My opponent playing some sort of junk style deck. This is a really good play by them. However, we do get to kind of get them this turn. Everybody's got to play to Avengers Compound, and we both make a little bit of a risky play here. I'm going to play Green Goblin, and my opponent is going to play Hobgoblin. So, because they have priority, their Hobgoblin is going to flip over first and doesn't have any room to join my side of the board. So I snap while I give them a Green Goblin and then throw down a Wolverine. And this is still a really close game, and I did not realize before I snapped that this is also a New York game, which is always a crazy headache. I don't know what I should do here. I just move all my rocks into New York just because it was funny, and then I play Destroyer, and I hope for the best. Here's what my opponent has come up with. They're gonna play 3 cards against us. We're gonna blow up all of my own cards though, and at this point, I think I want Wolverine to go over to New York, so that way we can win that location. My opponent has Hazmat, which gives them a bunch of negative power, and then they flip over a Carnage to win in New York, and Viper gives me Debris. That was a really, really close one, but we do ultimately get the win. If you're looking for more Kang Galactus Destroyer content, hit that subscribe button or check out the playlist in the video description. Every day this week, I put out a video featuring one card in this deck, highlighting my favorite games during my climb up to Infinite. My videos so far have featured Daredevil and Cosmo, which were in the last version of this deck, as well as Wolverine, Wave, and Electro. That's probably my favorite one. Make sure you check that one out. Armor and Atuma, and Spider-Man. And I've still got 2 more videos to go. I'm going to be rolling those out soon, covering Professor X and Destroyer. And yesterday, I put out a 25-minute comprehensive breakdown on Kang. You can find a link to a playlist featuring all of these games in the video description, but for now, let's get back to the climb. This game was another close one. I play a turn 5 Destroyer, and my opponent has already played a bunch of their 1-cost cards, which is going to make the end game game a little bit trickier for them, as you'll see in just a moment. But I blow up my Electro, and then on the final turn, I've got 7 energy to spend. So I can play a Tuma plus Green Goblin. I do also have Kang here, and to be honest, I probably should have played the Kang. I think I probably just was tired and missed it, though there is a chance that I didn't want to play the Kang because I didn't want to give my opponent more time to think about what could happen, though I definitely should have, because I could have still lost this game if my opponent had Arrow plus anything that only cost 1. However, all they have is Arrow, so we're going to be able to beat them on differential. Another really cool game with an interesting play. The one thing I wanted to talk about at the start of this game is Wakandan Embassy, and I meant to bring this up in my Kang video yesterday, but I would say that this is another drawback of Kang, because it isn't able to make use of that +2 power. It kind of just winds up clogging around your hand. And then Kang also gets peaked, which is obviously not great, or just doesn't matter, I should say, but it isn't great in that it could have affected a different card. It does also affect Hobgoblin, which typically is not a card that you really want to get peaked. However, with Oscorp Tower, I get to make kind of a cheeky play here. I get to give my opponent a Hobgoblin, then they're going to give it right back to me. So I thought that this was pretty fun. My opponent is also going to play another card there, and on turn 3 I kind of know what it is. We're also grabbing an Electro, and they don't even power it up with Peak or Wakandan Embassy for me. So kind of a bummer that now we're going to have that drawback. My opponent hits me with the thumbs up here, but on turn 4 we can play an Electro of our own. So it's kind of like removing the drawback from the Electro that they gave me, because we're going to play our own Electro and get the benefit of it. Of course, my opponent won't be held back by only being able to play 1 card per turn, but at least we'll still get to play with the big boys and have a bunch of energy ourselves. But it is scary in a peak game for my opponent to pass me an Electro here, because they could drop some huge cards. They're going to wind up playing Yondu to destroy my armor, and then a Psylocke on this turn. So it does seem like it is probably a Galactus deck here. We could check with Kang, and that is what I will probably do, or I could just Professor X. And the question is, do I Professor X into the Oscorp Tower or into that center location where they, like, which location are they more likely to drop Galactus in? Kang could give us some info here, but it's not guaranteed that my opponent will play to the same location, even if we Kang them. So I'm just going to Professor X center, and they played right, but they just played a Wolverine, so they were setting up for an even bigger flipped Galactus, and now they just won't be able to, and because of that, I believe, yeah, they just retreat. A standard wave into Galactus, but we have Kang, so in this one, I'm going to use Kang to see what my opponent's up to, if they have Arrow or anything like this. A Zabu Typhoid Mary deck is like 50-50 to play Arrow. Typically, you'll see these decks play Dracula and then like Infinite America Chavez, but they can have Magneto in them too, so playing Kang just to check here is worth doing. So I snap on my Kang turn, and my opponent retreats. Again, no priority, but I wave out a turn 4 Galactus into my opponent's Ebony Maw, and they don't have any disruption. So we are currently losing this game, but we'll probably win it as my opponent is no longer able to play to Monster Metropolis. So my opponent winds up retreating, but in this one, I think that I have to retreat, especially to that snap from my opponent. I just don't think we have anything great to finish this game off with. Dark Dimension is really tricky with this deck because we can't use it to lock out the game with Spider-Man and Professor X, and I think I can win Monster Metropolis, but I just don't think I can win in Wakanda with my current lead there of 1 and the current cards that I have in my hand. So I'm going to just retreat, and that puts me down to, let's see, a brief check-in here. That brings me down to 98.7, almost at 99. We're still climbing though, slowly but surely, and in this one, I don't play ramp, so that way I can Green Goblin into the Space Throne, and that's all that I have to care about this game. We just have to win the Space Throne and land a Galactus, and not have to get disrupted in that location. On turn 4, I'm going to play Wave into Baxter Building, and I'll jump ahead here a second, because on turn 5 I draw Kang, which is pretty good. That will allow me to draw one card deeper, as well as see if my opponent has any sort of disruption, and the answer to that is no. They are planning on playing Carnage this turn. Sometimes this deck will have Arrow, but sometimes it won't. Sometimes it will just be a destruction deck where my opponent just didn't draw Arrow or didn't draw Magneto, though Magneto actually doesn't stop us here. Only Arrow stops us. So that's all I was looking for with Kang. They don't have it. We're going to get back in it. We're going to drop the Galactus. We're going to snap, and we're going to walk away with a pretty easy win here. So now we are 1 cube away from rank 99. And we're gonna get to rank 99 with two of the homies, Professor X and Spider-Man. So we're already winning in Atlantis, and Professor X actually adds 8 power to that location, so that's pretty great for us. And then also great for us, my opponent Magics, which now means there's an additional turn in the game, and now means it makes sense to play Spider-Man into Limbo to lock them out of that location. Before we do that though, I drew Kang on turn 6, so I'm going to drop that down and see what my opponent has got going on, and it's actually nothing. I'm going to jump ahead for a second, but my opponent plays nothing on the Kang turn. So they didn't give us any information technically. However, it probably means that they have She-Hulk in their hand. But that's great. They can't She-Hulk if we Spider-Man and lock them out of Limbo. But my opponent is actually going to mix it up now on their second take for turn 6 and actually play something. They think about it for a little bit here, and then they decide to play a Sunspot and soak up some power. So we are going to have to add some more power to Limbo this turn. If my opponent just fully skips their turn, they'll go up to 18, but we draw a Destroyer, so we'll be able to use that to win and win the game, taking my opponent for 4 cubes, because they actually stay in this one here. Just another Kang bluff snap that caused my opponent to retreat. In this one, I play a Tuma into Clintar, which gets rid of its drawback. That's pretty good for me. And then my opponent plays a Shang-Chi. They're going to cycle it through their deck with Lockjaw. They just didn't have anything better to play there. And they'll still have access to Shang-Chi later on in the game because they can still draw it. So still something you got to be mindful of. On turn 5, I'm going to play Kang and Snap like we like to do, and my opponent plays a Leech. I'll jump ahead here a second so we don't have to watch the Kang animation just a bunch of times throughout this video. Kang animations and Galactus animations. This deck can definitely take a while to grind out the cubes, and you're just winning games for like 1 or 2 cubes because you're either winning with Kang, or you're winning because you lock them out, or you're winning because of Galactus, and all of those are like very telegraphed ways to win the game. But no matter, we are now going to move to our actual turn 5 here, and for that, what do I actually go for? I don't remember. If my opponent leeches me, we're actually in a good spot. So I guess I don't hate this play. Just Spider-Man into Clintar, so that way they can't win that location, and then try to win one of the other 2 locations with Destroyer on the final turn. Makes sense to me. My opponent is currently losing in Necrotia, though with a She-Hulk they are going to be able to win, but we can still win with a Destroyer in that location. But I think I said already that this game is super close, and that is because my opponent has Arrow to take me out of Necrotia, so they win that location, and we just barely win in the Hellfire Club, 15-14. We get the exact same opponent the next game, and here's the important thing. I'm currently at 99.6, so if I can win just 4 more cubes, I will be infinite. And that definitely colored a little bit of how I played this game, and I think potentially made me a little bit more willing to stick in it. It's an interesting game here too. We've got Sanctorum, locking down one of these locations, and I've got a pair of goblins. That's the important thing here too, is that I can play all of these goblins. I can get multiple more uses out of Shori's lab than my opponent. And I'm thinking this game's just going to come down to differential, because we're going to be able to add more power to the board than my opponent, and it's going to be tough for one of us to play into Sanctum Sanctorum. Again, we see the turn, now this time turn 5 Leech, into Reality Stone, into Kiln. kind of awkward. Now we're locked out of the kiln as well, and seeing that, I believe my opponent is going to snap here, and I didn't think about this at the time. Should have just thought for another second that my opponent probably can win this game. I'm thinking it's still differential and we're winning by 26, but all my opponent actually needs here is the Space Stone, and they'll be able to move into Sanctum Sanctorum, and I'll be the one locked out of 2 locations and unable to win this game. So I counter snap back, thinking that we'll at least try to win this one. I know that all my cards are leached, but I feel pretty good. They have to have Space Stone this turn, and it could be a bluff. Turns out it's not. They've got the Space Stone, so now instead of hitting infinite this game, I'm going to lose 4 cubes, and I'll need to play a few more. This one is a full lockout, kind of a fun one. I'm going to play Armor into Tinker's Workshop and then just throw a Wolverine into the Vault. And then on turn 5 with the extra energy from Superflow, I'm just going to play Professor X into Superflow. This is a little bit of a bold play. I snap while I do it, but it's one that I generally like making because players don't want to play into the Superflow before they have to, so that way they can keep making use of that extra energy. So that's an easy way to win that location. Then I've got Spider-Man here on turn 5 to lock down Tinker's Workshop, and the Vault is also going to close. So this one is now a guaranteed win with my opponent unable to play on the final turn. This game was interesting as far as information is concerned because we're going to get a little bit of information because of Kang, and my opponent is going to get a little bit of information because of White Queen. And in this one, I don't play anything on turn 4. I'm just hanging on to Armor and Attuma in case I need them in a post-Galactus turn. I'm going to snap on this turn and throw down the Kang. I throw that into Stark Tower just because we might have to play around Cosmo. If my opponent knows that Galactus is coming, they might Cosmo into Lechugia, at which point I want to Kang in a different location because my opponent has priority. So throwing Kang over into Stark Tower, and then we get a little bit of information ourselves, and we'll get to see what my opponent is up to. And their plan on turn 5, again, we'll just skip through some animations. They're going for Leech, and that is going to just basically mean that I'll want to play Galactus this turn, and then I guess I don't have to worry about Atuma's drawback, though we were going to follow it up with Armor regardless. But I think that we can still beat a Leech. We're going to have a little bit of additional power from the Wolverine. That'll flip a few times, and then we'll be able to probably play enough power to win while also dodging Shang-Chi. So I feel like my bases are kind of covered across the board. We'll see how it goes. My opponent does still play the Leech, and I think that that is pretty good for us, that they don't deviate from this plan. Will Galactus blow up the world here, and then we'll see how many flips we get of this Wolverine. I believe we only get 1, and that Wolverine goes right into Lechugia. Yep, so we're up by 3 going into the final turn, and 3 is a nice little number because that's the same number that Shang-Chi brings. So even if my opponent Shang-Chi's Attuma, they'll still lose because, well, we're also going to be able to play Armor on this final turn. So Armor won't protect us from Shang-Chi in this case, but it will protect us in that it's just 13 power getting added to the board, and that's enough to beat my opponent's Devil Dinosaur and take him for 4 cubes. And now all of a sudden, we are back to almost hitting infinite, and now suddenly I am back to almost being infinite, just 2 cubes away, and my opponent snaps on turn 1. So I'm just going to take this snap. I'm never going to snap back here. There's no reason to other than potentially to snap back. I don't know if my opponent is potentially a bot right here with a basic name like Lincoln, or if they just saw that my title was a few cubes short of a rank and were feeling generous and wanted to help me out. But they snap immediately at the start of the game, so we'll see how it goes. I'm going to start off with Armor into Onslaught Citadel, and my opponent is going to play Sunspot into the Raft. That's great. I love dodging Sunspot. I don't like to Galactus in the Sunspot location. They also typically don't like to play cards into the Raft because sometimes people will fill the raft early on. We've got 2 copies of the raft in this game, and that can be a great place to Galactus after your opponent has already filled that location. Sunspot makes that a little bit more awkward because they can still continue to add power, but we're just going to wind up dropping a Tuma here on turn 4 and getting some nice power ourselves. We actually have priority now, which is cool, and on turn 5, I think I'm just going to go for Kang. This is kind of a tricky game. We're not doing anything like super powerful. It would have been great. That's right. I mean, obviously I snap here when I play the Kang to try to bully my opponent out, but they're not going to have it, or they're just trying to give me some cubes. But they're going to wind up jubileeing out a Professor X, committing even more to the location where they're already winning by a bunch. And I think that that has got to be okay for me. I'm just going to try to win the other raft, and this actually works out fine because even if my opponent jubilees here, we will still win because Professor X with priority beats Jubilee. They instead decide to play a White Tiger, pushing a little bit more power into the Onslaught Citadel, but we've still won the raft. That's the important thing. We won that with really not much investment at all, so now we can just invest everything into the Citadel, Destroyer, Atuma, and Armor, and that should be enough to take the win and allow me to win 4 cubes to finally hit Infinite. It's actually been a second since I've hit Infinite, but we are going to be able to do it with this win. I'm free to play, as I've mentioned before, and the past 2 seasons I thought were a little bit rough, with Silver Surfer and Zabu being really, really good season pass cards that were just frustrating to compete with. However, on this one, I am going to be able to hit Infinite finally. You know, now I'm the scummy guy. I bought Kang, I bought the new hot card though. I will say, most of my climbing this season has been with the other Galactus list that I've been showcasing all week, not with this one. And then I think I will go in here and claim the card back as well to finish off the video. There we go. I do really like this card back as well. I'll pause it on this screen for a moment just while I talk about this deck. And you know what? Let me also just flash up on the screen the other deck. So I played this deck basically from rank 50 all the way up to rank 99, and I fell down to rank 96 or so, and I actually ping-ponged there a little bit, but I think that this deck is also great. Was playing this a bunch, ultimately was transitioning over to the Kang version of the deck after that came out. I cut Daredevil, which is like a really similar space as Kang, and I cut Cosmo for Green Goblin, which is a card that I've always wanted to try out. Cosmo also has some anti-synergy with Kang, and I never felt like I really needed it because sometimes you just want your Destroyer to activate in those other lanes to blow up your Wolverine or your Goblins that like you fail to activate on. So wound up trying the deck list that we saw. I'll throw that back on the screen for this whole video. Where's that at? That is this one. Great. And this was what eventually got me Infinite, but the other deck that I've been showcasing all week, I think definitely did a lot for my climb, and Kang just helped get me over that last little bit, but I do think that my other Galactus Destroyer deck that I've been showcasing could have done it as well. There are 2 more videos that I'm planning on putting out with this deck before the season is over, so subscribe if you want to see more, and then I'm sure I'll have some fun ones that come up later, just highlighting some various things. I kind of just want to put out like a District X video that includes all the games where I had to play with District X, because those were fun as well. So I think that'll be coming next week, but the main videos that I've got coming out, I've got a Professor X video and a Destroyer video. Both of those I think are really fun. Those are probably the 2 most powerful cards in this deck, and I still haven't talked about them yet. I mean, maybe other than Galactus. It's definitely primarily a Galactus deck, but Professor X and Destroyer both get a ton of wins, and I'm going to be breaking those down soon, highlighting them and showing just how powerful they are. But for today, that's going to be it for me, so thank you guys very much for watching. I'm No Lux Given. Peace.